Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, including the Sword and Shield stuff, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using the code OmniPoke. For today's video, we are doing another episode of Top Tier Tweaks. Malmo is this weekend, I fly on Friday. Jack is also attending the event, and we've been testing a decent amount, and we've also had the first tournament of this season, and actually there's been a couple of special events as well recently. So we're starting to see a metagame start to shape up. We've seen the decks that have started to be successful, so we're going to now look at what needs to change for these decks to continue to be successful, and yeah, go from there really. We will start off with the winning Mewtwo list, and the winning list, I haven't changed a card actually. I think if you are looking for any individual space from the list, it's gonna be difficult. I think something like a reset stamp is potentially flexible. I think maybe a Jirachi's flexible. Those are really your only wiggle room spaces for the deck. So at the moment, we're just rocking with Nico and towards 60. If you want to have answers to Goons, you can think about adding in the Muck. If you want to have Big Charm in here or something, you can do stuff like that, but I don't think there's much you can change here, to be honest. I think the deck is tight. Really tight. I've also wanted to have things like 4th half / 9th fire energy. Whenever I've tested this deck, I've found that my welders aren't live that often. So it can be frustrating sometimes when you're having to daily change away a welder just to try and then draw into like half plus welder at the same time. So potentially a wiggle room there as well if you have found the same thing as me. Where it can be frustrating sometimes when you're missing welders. Yes, Nico's shown that you don't need to hit welder every game. This isn't the same as Ability-Zard. You can get away with just doing Turbo Strike plays and trying to go about it that way, but it does help when you can hit the welders, let's be honest. So yeah, I wouldn't change many cards from this list at all. Possibly adding in Goon answers would be the only thing that right now this list doesn't cover. Goon's got top 4, Goons is hyped. So I can see there being room for a cut. One thing to note as well is that Rahul Reddy got top 4 of a special event, and he just cut a stamp for a Muck. You can do the exact same thing if you want to. From there, let's talk about Ability-Zard, the deck that got second at OCIC. This list is again very similar to Zach's successful second place finish. That list, the things I've changed are I've gone Acrobikes instead of Lucky Eggs. Personal preference of mine. You can still play Lucky Eggs if you want to. Lucky Eggs are less proactive, and I foresee that Lucky Egg in part was because of some fear of like Mewtwo Handlock stuff, and Mewtwo Handlock has really underperformed from the initial expectations of OCIC. So I think there would have been more reason to play Lucky Egg at the OCIC than there would be, for example, Malmo or other cups and stuff that you're going to in the following weeks, because that deck's going to be decreasing in popularity most likely. The other change I made was cutting Low Puff for Volcanion. This is because I'm really trying to heavily target ADPZation. I think there's no real point in trying to play this deck unless you're heavily targeting ADPZation. That just is my opinion, and Volk, in my eyes, does just that. The Low Puff can still come in handy against Mewtwo for sure, can still come in handy against Pikarom, but again, even though Pikarom did okay at OCIC, I can see its decline a little bit just because of things like Goons and Cincinnati Mill proving themselves. They were like unproven archetypes. We didn't really know how popular they would be in Australia. We've seen that they've had performances, right? And Pikarom doesn't really have answers for those decks too often, unless you're going for like Stamp Paralysis and these sorts of plays. Everyone will tell you that they can win, but it's a really hard matchup to beat Goons, to be honest, and the same thing for Mill, right? So I've cut the Low Puff. I found it just not, like, although it was a decently performing card in things like the Mewtwo matchup, which is important, and Pikarom, I found that, like, I just want to win as many ADPZation matchups as possible, and Volk helps you do that. It means that you can Flare Starter on 2, it means you can High Heat Blast for a Jirachi on 1, and then move into a Knockout on an ADP on 2, or if you get the Ninetales down plus Welder, High Heat Blast also knocks out Zacian for full energies on the board, which is just really good value. So at the moment the Volcanion's in over the Low Puff, and the Lucky Eggs have been cut for Acrobikes. Personal preference changes on my part. I wouldn't hate seeing Zach 60 just be locked in again for for the tournament. I actually think ADPZation is still pretty well placed. Looking at some of the SPE results as well, it seems like other people are jumping onto the bandwagon. Ninetales' Gust is such a good selling point right now. Against Mill, against all this other stuff. So yeah, it's just an excellent card, and we've seen that ADPZation is just simple and effective right now, which is pretty decent. Right, we'll move into my 2 lists of ADPZation. The one that you may be a bit more familiar with, this has been the list that I've been rocking on stream over the last few days, so make sure you check out twitch.tv/Team OmniPoke to follow our Twitch. You can catch us streaming most days in the week. And I'll try and stream as well tomorrow. Wednesday is always a stream day for us, and hopefully Thursday as well I'll be able to stream. But yeah, this is the list I've been rocking over the last couple of days. I really like ADPZation. It's still my front runner going into the tournament, quite honestly. It's just sheer consistency is what makes me think it's still probably a great play. This list right now isn't playing many mirror techs at all. This is bread and butter ADPZation. I've got 4th copy of Zation, 4th copy of Jirachi in here, just because I want to just draw well. That's it, right? Just make sure that the game plan of ADPZation comes off game after game after game, because the game plan itself is so damn strong. So yeah, that's really the main core here. I've gone very similar to Burt Walter's top 8 list. A couple changes that I've done. I have 1 Swell currently in over Labs. Now, this could be potentially a greedy cut, because we didn't see many Big Charm in OCIC. The Mewtwo lists seem to be favouring the Stealthy Hoods right now. ADPZation won't play them. Picrom's hopefully going down in play, and Mirror isn't really playing Big Charm that often either. So right now, I'm trying to be 1 step ahead and saying that Labs will be less useful for this tournament. Therefore, I can get away with a Swell to help be disruptive in the early turns against Welder decks. I think that's a big concern, potentially, for ADPZation, is that the Mewtwo players, the ADPZation players, even Picrom to an extent, they can just be super tempo-based on you and just outrace you too quickly. So going turn 1 Guzhala, grabbing the Swell to deny Giant Half, can be really, really good for you, especially against the Mewtwo, I might add. So I think Swell is a more important card going into this tournament to help beat the Mewtwo matchup, which is obviously going to be popular because Nico's done very well with it. So denying half, big value. Adding in the Swell has been the most recent change I've made to this list. Other than that, I've seen plenty of other ways you can play ADPZation. You can play coin flip Pokemon catchers instead of Theo and Great Catcher, and then another space elsewhere, possibly a Zacian or a Jirachi gets cut. I would say a Zacian before a Jirachi, just personal preference, because then you have higher odds of getting Tag Call for ADP for your turn 1 attachment. You can also see things like Crushing Hammers for Mirror as well, so yeah, there's plenty of different ways you can play this. Also, I'm playing a greedy card in just 1 escape board rather than 2 copies, and when I'm playing for Jirachi, there's a bit of a fight between those sorts of counts right now. Oftentimes you see like 4 go with 2, 3 go with 1 with the Jirachi. It's just one of those things that I made space for. 9 basic metals, by the way. But yeah, that's where we're at. Also, I've debated playing 0 stamp lists and just going for a 2nd copy of Marnie. Marnie is proactively strong in things like Mirror, especially if your opponent's turn 1 ADP attachment is not the special energy card, because then you're trying to Marnie them to 4 and then maybe they miss their special energy plus switch out, stuff like that. Also, that 2nd Marnie is just more security against Cincino Mill, making sure you have more shuffle draw effects, so that you can refill your deck when your hand size gets big, because normally against the control players, you will be Intrepid Swording early just so that you can get the custom catches before they get milled out your deck, right? So a 2nd copy of Marnie can be good against that. It can also be very good against Goons. So if you're expecting Cincino and Goons, there's certainly an argument to just play 2 Marnie, 0 reset stamp. Kind of greedy, or even just flip-flopping the 1 and then the 2 count with the Marnie instead. Again, that's up to you. But yeah, I'm giving you a bunch of information on ADPZation because that's what I know the most and that's what I've tested the most. But yeah, this is just the just draw good Zacian list. I can certainly see you even going down to 3 copies of Jirachi and Zacian. So if you want to have those spaces, be my guest, put in your text, do whatever you want. That's all good. I just have a random follow on Twitch. There's another thing that I'm trying right now, which is a cool hybrid of Zacian that also plays a Luke Metal. One thing I'm worried about going into Malmo is just the sheer number of mirror matches I'm likely to face. Now, in Mirror, there's a lot of nuance. There are a lot of things you can do to stay 1 step ahead of the Mirror, even if you are the person going 2nd. But one way I'm trying to tackle it in this list is having the Luke Metal GX in here plus Crushing Hammers. Crushing Hammers are sometimes teched into the pure ADP lists for sure, because sometimes you just get that attachment off them for free. But having the Luke Metal in here means that if you go second, you can prioritize that GX attack. Paired with the double metal frying pan, you then GX, have the frying pans, then your Zations are out of their Zation range. That's the idea. This list is also playing 0 Dedenne GX, very similar to the pure Luke Metal build that we saw come second place in the Japanese Aichi tournament. So it's a bit of a throwback to that sort of list, really, in many ways. But we have the hybrid here, where the ADP is still in the list, therefore you can have a much better time against the control decks. Also, if you're the person going first in a mirror, you still probably want to GX first, because then you'll be super far ahead, right? So this is a fun hybrid. I remember when I initially played Luke Metalization at the very beginning of this season, before we even had the cards in real life. I was always playing the hybrid. I was always playing 1 ADP, probably 1 or 2 Auroras. So yeah, I've stuck to this, and I feel like it's still pretty decent. Frying Pan is going up in value right now because there's expected to be a lot of abilities trying to use things like Heatrans and like Volks for early pressure on your Zations. Also, this Frying Pan denies Mewtwo players from using their Victini V against you, so it can make it awkward for them to try and do the prize race, and it gives you the opportunity then to use the 1 energy ADP GX attack way more consistently. So there's a lot of merit to this list as well. A few other things that are slightly different from the previous list. Obviously, I'm just playing the Swell and not playing the Shrine, so because, you know, some matchups you just won't use the ADP GX attack, so you have a bit less one-hit KO options on your side. You trade that off, though, for having a Malolana in here. Obviously, a lot of Malamar players will try and do the Latios thing to stop you getting the 2 energy ADP GX attack off. So going for the 1 energy Luke Metal GX attack and actually attacking with a Luke Metal, having a reduction effectively of 80 with a Frying Pan plus resistance plus the GX attack, having the Malolana and Sinlining back that Malolana is going to be really good for you. So yeah, this is a list that I'm still trying out. You know, only a couple days left before Malmo, but this has just been a hybrid that I've sort of harped back to after testing this really early on in the format. But yeah, just my thoughts on Zacian. I think there's going to be a decent amount of innovation for ADPZation coming into this tournament, because the mirror is one of the most important matchups to win, because of the sheer number of day 2s that ADPZation had. I can see it easily being like 25% plus of the day 1 field. So you can expect to face it 2 to 3 times in day 1, and the outcome of those ADPZation matchups alone could be the difference between day 2 and not day 2, right? So I think it's still public enemy number 1, even though it wasn't in the finals of OCIC. It got so many accumulative points and seems to be so consistent at what it does that it has to be like on your radar as one of the top decks to play against. The second most popular deck that made J2s was Pikarom, actually. Now, I think Pikarom's stock is going down quite a bit. Like I said, you don't really have many answers to Goons. This list doesn't play anything like, the Electros, but you can do if you want to have a slightly better time against the Goons. And it's also not playing any answers to Cincino Control. I don't think there are any easy techs you can add in to try and beat Cincino Control. If you want to tie the matchup, you can just take no prizes against them and try and just putting in one Oranguru and just reloading your own Oranguru each turn. I mean, you can do that if you really want to squeeze a tie. One thing about this list is that I've actually harked back to a very old supporter engine. This is the supporter engine I played when I won the special event in Paris. 2 Bills, 2 Cynthia. Really because I need to steal spaces back from this list. I've changed my Oranguru to an Absol to have better disruption right now. Jirachi engine is in Mewtwo, ADP, Mali, Mirror, Abilitizard, right? So an Absol, if you can squeeze it in your list, and if you have board space, put an Absol in your deck, right? It's just that it's that simple. The card's so good. So in cutting Oranguru, I've then changed my supporters back to Cynthia and Bill, rather than having Research. I would only really play Prof Research if I was playing Oranguru. They kind of go as a package, so you can protect your E-powers, you can protect your customs that little bit better. So just a quick tidbit there. I've also put Zero Aura GX back in the list just for extra pivoting options, again to help defend against other Absols. Also, Power Plant is at like an all-time low since the card's release, so getting Zero Aura value seems very good. Not much else to say about this list. At the moment, I'm not playing big charms, but you can think about putting them in. I'd still expect the vast majority of ADPZations to be playing one copy of Labs. I'm just personally not at the moment. I'm playing Swell because I'm trying to stay ahead, but maybe I get punished for it, you know? I am playing Vitality Band. I think it's important enough to have a good time against AdPZation and Mewtwo, and this Vitality Band just helps your Coco V, it helps your Pikarom reach as well. Just seems like an excellent addition. Whenever I've played the Pikarom with the Vitality Band in, it's felt like a really nice card to have in certain spots. So yeah, that's where we're at with this list. For the most part, I believe non-Tag Call package lists of Pikarom performed higher than lists that did play Tag Call. I think the top two placing, or two of the top 32 Pikaroms, one was 4 Volkner, 3 Research. One was 2 Marnie, 2 Cynthia, 4 Volkner. Actually, there was 3 in top 32, and one was 4 Volkner, 3 Cynthia. So only one of the lists did well with Research, and I don't actually think they played a Rangaroo, which is a bit concerning. But yeah, that's Pikarom. It's still okay at trading against you know, the regular decks out there, the ADPs, the Mewtwo, stuff like that, and AdPZation. It's never going to be too far out of your control, but I just feel that this deck doesn't feel that safe going into this tournament because of the opportunity for Goons and to Mill to just make you scoop, basically, because you can't do much against them outside of the paralysis stamp stuff. And obviously, if you're the Goons player, you're just targeting that Raichu with the Yveltal GX attack, sacking those prizes, and moving on with your day. Like, it's pretty simple. You're like, if you think you can just para chain against them, it's just not going to happen. They're a better deck than you'd think at actually working, you know? Let's look at my list of Goons. It's actually quite different from the top 460. I have incorporated this Virizion GX. We've seen how Breeze Away can work. One thing that really surprised me when I saw Breeze Away in the list was there wasn't Dolls. Dolls have great synergy with the Virizion, of course, because you can just Breeze Away into a Doll, and then you're again giving your opponent one less prize card. So I like having the Dolls. I think it really improves your ADP matchup. Having the Dolls in here, it makes the Breeze Away much more live. I've also got the Stealthy Hood in here. It's just 1 copy right now. I could see it going up to 2 copies. Outside of that, very, very simple Goons list. There's not much else going on here. I have cut Mimikyu just because all the Mewtwo's are playing double Hood, so I don't think Mimikyu's that valid. You're just going to try and obstruct through them all the time. If you want to play Mimikyu, you can try playing, what's it called? The hammers. What are they called? What set is this card? Dangerous Drill. That's the card. That's the card. Dangerous Drill. Yeah, I've seen a couple of lists of Obstagoon playing drills. You can drill off hoods, so you can help beat Stinger at that little bit more effectively. And also, you can get rid of Stealthy Hoods and make your Mimikyu live. So if you still want to play Mimikyu in your Goons list to improve the Mewtwo matchup, you've got to play drills probably, because otherwise the Mimikyu is going to be doing nothing for you. So yeah, at the moment it's a quite safe, streamlined Goons. Making spaces for those Dolls makes sense to me. It buys you extra turns. It makes you way less YOLO when you are going for this Yveltal GX play, because you're not always sacking like a Jirachi or just leaving yourself with 1 Goon in play. If that Goon does get like brought up or like knocked out or whatever, you've just lost the game straight then and there. But if you have the Dolls down, you have a bit of leeway. It means if ever you are getting hit with like Marnie combos, you can always have that extra turn to try and draw a card, because you can just send a Doll up to them. If you do top deck and it's a good top deck, you can just put your Doll back to the bottom and play your normal game plan. If you're left with a dead hand, you can pass into them, get yourself another chance next turn. So yeah, I think Goons is actually a solid archetype. I can see it doing annoyingly well again in Malamar, so it's something that I've got my eye on. Mill almost made a bunch of top 8s, but there was an unfortunate ruling, so we didn't get to see quite as much control. Possibly could have gone even further in the tournament. Jack did a video on this just yesterday. Since then, I've experimented with the Aerodactyl package in this list. So I've gone down to 2 Stealthy Hoods. The idea is, as long as you hood your Wob and hood your Zation, you can have a good game plan against AdPZation. As long as you use your Dolls effectively and know how to play it. It's obviously a bit more cautious and prizing becomes an issue and stuff like that. But adding in the Aerodactyl means you can have a much better time against Stinger. If you are playing the Aerodactyl, you also need to play Faber, so you can get rid of their weak guard energies to stop them going that route, so that your Mewtwo can just kill their Aerodactyl. Also, I'm playing 1 Fighting, 1 Fire, as well as 1 Aurora. If you want to have better odds at hitting the Aerodactyl combo off of them using reset stamps against you, or off of them using Marnies against you, you could try and add in a Guzmahala to grab your Aurora that much easier. Something you can try, because you are playing the tag call, so you have multiple outs. Because I imagine most times people are going for the Stinger play, they're probably going to try and do it with a stamp at the same time, now that the Aerodactyl is a known quantity. We initially saw this Aerodactyl package in the Magcargo list, which is way easier to get together, because you can always just smooth over the Aerodactyl to the top. Whereas now, if we get stamped, we have to just try and make do as many times as possible and see what we get out of it. So it's not like a guaranteed way of beating Stinger, but at least gives you an option, rather than them just going like, Stinger, down, good game, you know? So we're trying to answer Mewtwo, and we're trying to answer Ability-Zard as best we can. It's by no means like an auto win, but you have some outs here to try and make those matchups a bit closer. Other than that, the Faber can also come in handy against ADP, of course, if you find it in the first opening turns. Even if they've used their GX attack, the Faber and Crushing Hammers on top of that can still be awkward for them. And obviously, you want to max out that Crushing Hammer count just to try and stop them GXing at all costs in the early turns. Sometimes if your hammers go well in the early turns and you can draw enough with Intrepid Sword and make do, you can just be, similar to Pidgeotto control, Orangering back Crushings as much as possible and stopping them ever like getting many attacks into you. It's really bad for them to attack with their Zacians as well, because it makes them keep drawing more switch cards. So it's even a win if they're just using their sources every time you use your Crushing Hammers onto their Zacians, because Zacian's a really annoying attacker against Mill, because they have to keep finding resources, or sometimes they just pass into you altogether. So yeah, that's the list. At the moment, I'm showing the Cincino list. There's also the Magcargo list. The Magcargo list incorporates the Sleep package with Mareep, which I think is pretty reasonable for sure. It does eat up a lot of spaces. You need to play extra switch cards, extra balloons, and 3 stadiums. At the moment, this list is playing no stadium, just choosing to play Faber if there's anything that's that annoying for us. For example, Faber can also help out if your opponent is going to put Power Plant down against you to stop you using your Mewtwo GX attack. So yeah, at the moment we've got the Faber in place instead, but that's the list with Mill. Again, I can foresee it doing pretty well. I don't think its ADP matchup is that fantastic, especially if there are going to be quad Pokemon catcher plus custom builds of ADP. So there is that to be concerned about, but otherwise it's actually pretty okay. So we've gone through almost everything here, just Malamar. This is a slightly tweaked list to Danny's top 16 build. Very, very similar in concept though. Basically all the same attackers. The only thing I've done is I've cut one of the 4 Jirachis to add in a Ditto. Ditto's a 5th Inkay at the worst of times. And at the best of times, it gives you an out to the Control and the Goons matchups that little bit better, because you now have your own Stinger in here. The reason why we have Ditto Stinger rather than Mewtwo Stinger is because, of course, the Mill decks can beat Mewtwo with the Aerodactyl play. If you just physically use the Naganadel, though, they can't do anything about it, and then you can just use your Baby Blount and win the game. You can Stinger against Goons quite happily, and then you've opened up your Baby Blount spread turn, which is really good, especially when you've normally got spell tags and stuff popping off if you really want to. If you've had previous spell tag damage going into stuff as well, it could even mean that Jet Needle as an attack can do enough damage, so... I haven't tried this out a huge amount, but it's something I discussed on my stream after playing a few games against Cincino and against Control, where it didn't feel like you had much of a win condition outside. Well, especially now with Virizion GX going into the Goons decks, your win condition of trying to just like use spell tag damage and stuff like that is just way, way worse, right? So having Stinger into the Blound gives you some really good power spike turns, and it makes the most out of early spell tags and stuff. So yeah, that's just my personal opinion. I think it's way stronger against Cincino than it is against Goons, but just it's like an out against both of them, which is pretty good for you. The cut for the Naganadel was the 4th spell tag. If you just want to play the DDG list, you can cut, well, ex-DDG, you can cut Naga, you can cut Ditto, it's 4th Jirachi and 4th spell tag. That's it. I tried not to eat into any of the consistency cards. You can eat into the Acrobite count if you are not a fan of them, for example. But that's just what I've gone with to have a better time against Cincino and Goons, because it feels like those are going to be at least 1 or 2 rounds of your day in Malmo, most likely. And again, it's just a bad feeling when you go into those sorts of matchups and you don't have or like you don't have a game plan prepared really. So yeah, that is my top tier tweaks. Haven't made many changes to the 2 decks that made the finals. Obviously they made the finals, so they're doing well in this format right now. The ADPZation lists, you can either go super crazy with tech cards, or you can just try and go streamlined and simple. Let me know your thoughts on the Marnie versus reset stamp debates. Which way do you sit on it? Do you play no stamps? Do you play a combination of the two? I'll hear it all down below. Pikarom, can it survive in this format? I think it's going to start being on the decline. Cincino and Goons is still only really being soft-teched for in a lot of my decks right now, so they can still take wins for sure. Mali, Bricks, but does have a good matchup spread, so yeah. Let me hear your thoughts of the top decks going into Malmo. What are you going to be playing? What are you worried about playing? And we'll see how me and Jack do over next week. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you for another video tomorrow. Cheers.